Welcome to the Tackling College Sports Podcast, the definitive resource to help you navigate your way to play college-level sports. Here are your hosts, Chris Legates and Mark Franco, where they want you, the TCS Nation, to be your best.
Welcome, TCS Nation, and thanks for tuning in to the Tackling College Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Franco, and alongside me is my co-host who longs for the days of waking up, cracking open a Yoo-Hoo, and watching a Creature double feature, Chris Legates. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, and good morning to you, Renee, as well.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, Chris, our guest today is an author, a certified speaker, trainer, and a USSF and NSCAA licensed coach. Wow.
Yeah.
Let's welcome Renee Lopez. Good morning, Renee.
Good morning. Thank you.
Let's before we start, Renee, let's just point out that we thank you for carving out some time, especially post Hurricane Irma. How are you doing?
Well, it was definitely a rough few days, but the eye of the storm actually came through our area, and our community is rebuilding. So we just ask everyone to send donations down this way, and also just more importantly, your prayers as we rebuild. And I got some minor damage at my house, but there's a lot of people who are much worse off than me. So I am definitely blessed, and just ask for lots of prayers down this neck of the woods.
Will do, absolutely.
Definitely.
Could have been a lot worse, I'm sure.
Yes.
Renee, let's dive right in here, shall we? So,
Absolutely.
we know that you've had an extensive coaching career. However, you do want to focus on what you're doing currently. So could you bring us up to speed with what you're doing with the RL Academy?
Absolutely. Well, I've been a college coach for 14 years, and like you mentioned, and one of the things that I had done during that time was, for many years, being all across the country doing recruiting seminars and going out to clubs and also high schools and working with high school student athletes just to present some information. And after every single time that I would do one of those seminars, somebody would come up to me and say, "You should write a book." And for 14 years, I blew them off. And so about a year and a half ago, I decided to step out of college coaching and really focus on helping student athletes through the process, because I think there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. And I wanted to be able to clarify a lot of what that looked like. And so I do some leadership development training and coaching education programs, as well as helping high school student athletes and their families walk through the process and get them to understand what, the insider's look is from multiple college coaches. And through my book that'll be coming up and coming out this spring is we've actually interviewed 35 college coaches and to just get their take on the college recruiting process. And my book is called Looking for a Full Ride, an Insider's Recruiting Guide. And it really focuses on the insider's tips to be able to help you through the process. It's such a scary and overwhelming and daunting process for student athletes. So we want to help them through that.
Right. Excellent. So outside of waiting the 14 years to start the book, can you tell us what have been some of the toughest challenges in your career?
Well, I think for being a college coach, working with 18 to 22-year-olds, every day is different. That's for sure. Right. But I think, I've taken over a lot of programs that were struggling. I inherited one team that was 0-19. And when I inherited that program, we really wanted to help teach them the ways to be able to move forward and to help them through the process. And we ended up fast forward a couple years later, and we won the most wins we ever had in the Division I era, as well as, another program I took over that was 3-12-2 when I came in, and a few years later, back-to-back 11-win seasons and 6 all-conference players and an All-American in that. So, those are definite challenging situations to take over as a coach. But, it's something that, you really look and say, what can you do to, help kids go through the process on the field, but more importantly, look at seeing how do we help them through those 18 to 22-year-old years where they're really just trying to identify who they are and figure out what they want to do with their lives. And, it's really more about, everyone always asked me, what did you coach? And I always said, I always coached my kids. I didn't coach soccer. I coached my kids. And
Right.
once they're played for me, they're one of my kids, and they're one of my kids for life. So I have, I don't know, 300 and 400 alumni that are out there that I refer to as my kids. It's, we look at that as saying, how do you help those kids? And I still keep in touch with many of my alumni, and watching them be productive members of society has been really fun too. So there's a lot of challenges being a coach, but I think it's a very rewarding career for sure.
Excellent. Chris?
And presently now, what challenges are you finding with your career as you launch this side of now what the new endeavors are?
Well, I think, for us, it's really, it's a transition for me and a learning curve, and I'm learning everything when it comes to social media and marketing and how does that all work. And I am not a techie person at all. So I'm still learning all of the nuances of that. And I need some younger folks to help me along the way.
Right.
I'm not afraid to ask for that. So I have had many 18-year-olds help me in the process of learning the technology that's out there in social media and working through that. So, but there's definitely a learning curve in that, but I think it's something that can definitely be overcome, and learning, having owned my own business for a long time and camp businesses and things like that, it's more of just learning and staying up to date.
Renee, with the vast experience you have in not only college coaching, but you were a compliance officer and you did other duties in college athletics, how do you think things have changed as far as recruiting is concerned? And maybe could you highlight the pros and cons of how it's been different over the years?
Oh, it definitely has changed. Obviously with the fact of social media has come into a huge play, whether that's coaches being able to like a post on Facebook or just being able to interact with recruits over social media. It's definitely changed the landscape. And also I think there's a good and a bad side of that. I think it's opportunities for kids to be able to market themselves positively to college coaches, but there's also those, student athletes who are making bad decisions and posting those things on all over social media. So I think there's a good and a bad to that. The other part has become, I think it's been very much driven in terms of, the club sports and making that as a means for some kids to be able to go. And to be honest with you, sometimes that is there's a financial part of that can restrict kids that may be coming from lower incomes, depending on the sports. Again, that may be more towards, the volleyballs and softball and baseball and basketball as well as soccer. And I think those are definitely changed the landscape. And, obviously with the NCAA rules that are ever changing, I think it is to protect the kids, but it has also become that these kids are getting recruited at such an early age. I just heard of an 8th grader getting committed to an SEC school. And to me, I'm not sure that that's a great, in the best interest of our kids, because, we're seeing a higher rate of transfers that are happening during the freshman year than used to be 10 years ago. And I think it's because we're pressuring kids as coaches to go in that direction and make decisions. Some of those kids haven't even, they don't have a driver's license, let alone figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And, and coaches change. And, and then they also, when they're in 8th grade and they're committing to a school, none of the players that they're going to play with are even at the school yet, and so I think that has changed it. And I think that's something that the NCAA is starting to step in and do some things to prevent it to going that direction. And I see some things changing, more dead periods, things like that happening for coaches not being able to contact kids and have them on campus, which I think is actually some good steps that the NCAA is stepping in to do.
Yeah, we saw women's lacrosse was probably the first in the last couple of years now who's adopted a different legislation, at least as far as being able to contact players. I think they have to wait till their junior year now. And like I said, my background now is 26 years in college coaching with women's soccer. It has to stop somewhere, because I know very similar stories like you're mentioning of 8th and 9th graders verbally committing to schools. And to me, that's the landscape, and where it's going has to come backwards, because it's absurd where it is right now.
Absolutely. I think 100%. I think we have to always put in perspective what's best for the student athlete. And, for me, anytime I was talking with a kid, I would say, okay, let's talk about your timetable. Let's talk about what you want and what schools you want to explore and really figure out before you commit to us. And I always said, if a kid is being pressured that hard, they need to make sure that they've explored all their options and realize, what's the best interest for them. And I think the parents need to also be active in that process, not necessarily in contacting the coaches, but I think very important that they're, looking and weighing out the options and making sure it's in the best interest for the kid.
And again, you and I both have background in soccer, but as it applies to clubs, whether it's now AAU basketball or junior softball or Premier Soccer, ECNL, whatever initials we want to use, how do you think that's affected the recruiting process now with kids specializing in sport at such a young age, so much money being invested in that? Do you think that's changed the recruiting process over the last, say, 10 years?
Absolutely. I went into this 14 years ago and really starting to realize how recruiting was different back then. A lot of times it was we were going out to high schools and we were working with the high school coaches to be able to identify student athletes. And now I think, it's really going through the club system. And I'm afraid of what's starting to happen with that is the club system, especially in some of those sports you mentioned, have now utilizing their coaches, to be almost acting as an agent, they won't title them that, but that their whole selling point to kids is we're going to help you find a scholarship, and we're going to help you find the right fit for you to play in college. And, that may also be a disadvantage for kids with lower socioeconomics. And that scares me and that worries me because I had some kids that came from disadvantaged, backgrounds, and it's hard for them to get seen. And if they're not doing some of those things, it's not impossible, but it makes it a little more difficult. And so, that's one of the things that I do in working. I work with consulting with different families, and I work with them and help them through that process and teaching them ways to get seen, especially if they're not playing on that top level club program. And how do they market themselves, and whether it's from videos to just how to send an email to a coach and working with that situation. I think it's education as well in the process. We have to make sure we're teaching them the ways to do it, especially if they're not in those club systems.
Yeah, that's a tremendous point that you bring up, Renee, about the socioeconomic part, because when we look at club programs, and again, my background like yours is with soccer, we know that those could cost $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 and $5,000 to be part of. And even though there may be some scholarships available, there's a lot of restricted kind of attitudes towards pay for play. If kids can't afford it, that's one way that the door might get closed for them in the college game.
100%. And I've seen that happen. And so, I hope that we can also, find other ways to help them. That's one of the things that I work with a lot of student athletes in that way who may be in that situation.
Renee, our podcast is geared towards that high school student athlete that wants to continue their career, regardless of what the next level may be. It could be a Division I player, Division II, Division III, whatever. But what would you believe that some of the common denominators are that all student athletes in college need to have, regardless of the level?
Absolutely. I have been on staff at the University of Florida and, also been a D1 head coach at University of South Carolina Upstate and also served time in the Division II as a head coach for 8 years in the Carolinas as well as out in Colorado and also been a head coach in NAI. And so, one common denominator that I've seen personally, but also after interviewing 35 college coaches for my book research, is we obviously want that well-balanced student athlete. They're very talented in their athletic abilities, but also academics is a priority for them, that coaches aren't going to have to struggle to get you into the school, that you're putting academics first. And I think that's important. Obviously we want good test scores and good GPAs, but I think there's also the intangibles. And one of the things that I've seen when interviewing all these coaches, I asked them the exact same question, and they all said to me, we're really looking beyond a really good student athlete, in terms of academics and athletics. We're really looking for two factors, and that's that a kid is can handle adversity and they're resilient, and that they have good character and they can lead other people to it. And I think you look at that and you say that stems from the environment they're being raised in, and I think that is something that kids need to make sure that they realize that they are always representing themselves, whether it's, how they speak to the teachers or maintenance people in their high school, or how they're out and about and speaking to their coaches or their teammates. And I think there's an importance of student athletes realizing that, and that, on social media may be one thing, but also that how they interact with people is also a reflection, and that many coaches are asking those questions. They may ask the high school secretaries, How does this kid interact on this campus? And I can tell you, those secretaries are not afraid to tell you, ooh, this kid's making some bad decisions, or, hey, they're a great kid. They're always polite. They're always great character. And so you look at that and say, those two important characteristics is how do they handle adversity, but also how are they leading and what does their character look like? And, that is something I actually have created a document on my website, and we'll give you all that information that lists the leadership characteristics that college coaches look for. And it's actually a free special report we've created. So allow kids to understand what college coaches are looking for in dealing with adversity and leadership characteristics.
And I can tell you firsthand that not just the coaches are the people we contact in our recruiting process where I'm at. We'll spend time speaking with the guidance counselor of the student athlete and the teachers just to get that kind of feedback that you just mentioned as well.
Absolutely. And I think more and more coaches are doing that. You hear of awful things that are happening in social media, from kids that are making bad decisions. And, coaches just don't want to take that risk. When you are recruiting a student athlete, the reality is they're a representation of you and your program. And, coaches don't want a bad name for their program because it just hurts them in recruiting and also hurts their overall, in the press and the image. And they want to make sure that they're representing their program in a positive manner. And so student athletes, need to make sure that their character is first.
Absolutely. Mark.
Renee, with many student athletes focusing on one sport these days, can you give us your take and even perhaps what you've heard from the college coaches and their take as far as the pros and cons of the multi-sport athlete?
Yes, I had actually a lot of my student athletes had played multiple different sports in high school, as well as I actually had a couple of two-sport athletes in college. Now, that's a little more challenging thing to do because you're looking at rest and recovery and depending on when seasons happen. But I think it is a definite thing in terms of cross-training and be able to protect our kids from injury. So most college coaches will look at high school student athletes who are playing multiple sports and, look and say, okay, I think this is a good thing. They may not encourage it at the college level. Some coaches may. And there may be some definite overlaps. You may look at a kid who, may play football in the fall and then, look to run track in the spring. Or, one thing that we often see, is, a lot of times you'll have soccer players who also want to play lacrosse because of the different seasons. And, sometimes that is a possibility at the college level. I'm not sure it won't be a possibility a lot of times at the Division I level, but oftentimes at a Division II or NAI or junior college or Division III programs, maybe opportunities to do that. But, I don't see it as a bad thing. I think a lot of coaches are seeing it as a good thing because you're also learning from other coaches. You're learning to train and, there's nothing better. And I think we can all attest to this. There's nothing better than a girl that you're recruiting who's a goalkeeper who's also played basketball. Right. I can tell you there is some things that are just inherent in that that really do help you. And so I think there's something of an overlap in looking at depending on what the situation is. But, I think it's a good thing. I wouldn't deter it. Obviously, it's just a matter of if you do want to do both in college. There are some coaches who will be 100% no in that answer. And there may be some that may be open to it. And it's areas to explore when you're doing the process of narrowing down schools. You may be able to go to a smaller school and play two sports, versus maybe going to a bigger school and you'll have to focus on one. And that's the coach's discretion.
I'm just curious, the example that you're familiar with, what were the sports involved?
Oh, well, I actually had multiple student athletes who had played lacrosse and played soccer at the college level. And so that was a little bit easier because fall season was for soccer and spring season was for lacrosse. But, obviously we also had to make sure that we got recovery for our student athletes. Otherwise, you are very prone to more injuries just because your body needs time to rest. And I think that's the important part and making sure that we have that.
And was it a D3 situation?
Division II, actually. And I actually had one student athlete who played tennis in the spring and played soccer for me as well. And it was a lot of organizing of schedules, I can tell you that. Yeah. So I've only
plus
seen
classes.
That's Division I players do it. So yes.
Wow.
And wow. I always said I will not even have this conversation unless you guys are over a 3.0 GPA.
Don't bring up the others. It's better be one sport.
Yes,
Chris.
And I said, get your schoolwork.
It's right. Chris.
Renee, you said you've interviewed 35 coaches for your book, and obviously your vast experience in college athletics. How would you suggest that student athletes go about contacting college coaches? What is it they should do, shouldn't do, and maybe even the timeline with that a little tiny bit?
Absolutely. Well, I would say there are two fatal mistakes that I want to address that often happen, and I think it's very, very important to know. First off is that student athletes think that they're just going to get seen, and just like, the movie The Blind Side, that they're just going to knock on their door and show up and say, come play for me. Well, that's a huge fatal flaw. I think for many student athletes, it's important to realize that they have to market themselves. And I think the other important part is they need to realize that when they contact coaches, that it is very important that initial emails do not come from the parents. They do not come from the parents. This is very, very important. Mm-hmm. And I think, the other, things within those emails is thinking towards the idea that this is just like a first date. It really is. That, you kind of get to know each other. You're starting out the conversations. You're talking about your information. You're giving them, your test scores and your GPA, and you're telling them a little bit about you, and then hopefully sending them some video clips as well. And, tell them about your upcoming schedules. It's not the time to be asking for, I want a full ride scholarship on your initial emails.
Right.
And, you look at that and say, we have to think about when you ask that question on an initial email to a college coach. I had a friend of mine say this. I thought it was brilliant. He's like, it's like asking, let's get married on the first date. And,
right.
We don't want to go that route. The reality is you need to get to know each other. You need to find out if it's even the right fit for you, and make sure that the campus is great for you academically and socially, as well as, an athletic program fit, and making sure that before you go to the step of let's talk about scholarship, that you need to make sure it's the right fit for you overall of a program academically, and also, the athletic side of things. And I think that's important. But the fatal flaw that I see all the time is kids just sitting back and thinking that they need to just sit around and college coaches are going to knock at their door. And then the parents say, well, my kid hasn't done something. They haven't contacted someone. I'm just going to do it for them. And in the initial email, my daughter or my son doesn't know that I'm sending this email, but that is an absolute fatal flaw. Many of these college coaches have said we don't even read past that first two sentences. All we do is delete in our emails. And, when you think that college coaches are getting 200, emails, every couple of weeks from college, from high school student athletes, they're going to choose the kids that are showing maturity and taking initiative to do that. So I think it's important to make sure that they do the right steps and that those initial emails don't come from parents. Obviously, when you get down the road in the process, parents need to be able to, be able to ask some questions, especially when the financial picture comes in. But that's just not the right first steps to be happening.
And we've talked about economics, Renee. In the recruiting process, there's a misconception that you need to spend all kinds of money, whether it's on recruiting services and videographers and, music to be put behind the video and everything else. But if you were to give your expert opinion, where should there be, if any, money spent by a family in the recruiting process?
Well, I think it's important to really understand what those recruiting services are doing. I am a recruiting consultant, which is very different than a recruiting service. Recruiting services will send out emails to college coaches, and they'll create that pretty little website for you, or maybe your video for you. And the reality is, all of you high school student athletes, you guys have way more access to technology, and you can do all that yourself, and I wouldn't spend those dollars. Here's why. The reality is those college coaches really aren't looking at those emails. They may have received them, but oftentimes they are not geared towards the right fit for college. I used to get multiple times a week. I would get kids saying, hey, a recruiting service saying, hey, you really need to take a look at this student athlete. She wants engineering or she wants nursing. And the school I was at didn't even offer that. And I say,
Doesn't offer it,
you guys haven't really researched it. So it's really the idea. It's just a blast of emails out to college coaches. Most college coaches just delete those emails. We actually don't utilize as our priority in terms of recruiting. Could that possibly happen? And do you see that kids, quote unquote, get signed who have been part of a recruiting service? Yes, but sometimes that is a claim that those kids would have gotten recruited anyways, and just because they were on a recruiting service. Instead, I think it's important for them to have somebody to walk them through it. Whether it's a high school coach or a club coach who knows the process, or someone like myself who works with student athletes that has the overall finding the right fit for the student athlete. A recruiting consultant I think is important to have, and somebody to walk you through that process. But I think, putting video clips together and things like that, for the most part, those kids can do that. And they are way more tech savvy than I am. And they can put that together. They don't even need to spend money on those things. But making sure that they're having somebody to guide them through the process, I think, is important. And so if anything you're going to spend money on, and maybe if you're not a techie, maybe you spend a couple $100s on putting a good video clip together. But I think most student athletes can do that themselves. And then the other thing is if they are going to spend some money is hiring someone to be able to walk them through the process. And I don't think that's a recruiting service. I think that's someone who works as a recruiting consultant who has been there and walked through that. I think that's probably the minimal amount of money you really need to be spending to be out there and make sure you're getting marketing yourself to be recruited.
And let's face it, from the video side, most student athletes and or parents are walking around with one of the best film video devices via the smartphone.
Absolutely. There's no reason you can't use that or an iPad to record and utilize that. You don't need to spend, I've heard of people spending $2,000 on a video, and I just look at my head, shake my head and go, oh no, you could have spent it on books for college instead.
Right. And if you look back on the old days, and I'm probably dating myself even, prior to when you started coaching as well, Renee, you would get boxes of VCR tapes, and then probably your coaching when you started, it was DVDs or CDs, and now it's just a YouTube link, which you look at it and you talk about, how much it's streamlined and how easy it is now for the tech savvy 17-year-old. All you have to do is take those clips, and they're great at using iMovie, put it together, create your YouTube link, and you email that to your, the coaches that you're interested in. Boom, there you go. And that costs you nothing, So, and as you know, as well as I do from the coaching aspect, there really is no such thing as a bad video. You'll be able to see what you need to see in an open, wide angle shot of a soccer game about a player, as opposed to Brazilian music playing and the kid is juggling and catching it on their neck and then doing, bicycle kicks and things that don't pertain to the game. So I totally agree with you that I think even as the tech savvy generation matures, and so do the products mature, you'll be able to see from a recruiting standpoint, the need to spend money on things like that is non-existent.
Absolutely. I think that's 100%. I think the big key, though, is when you are sending a video clip to a college coach, is making sure that you identify which team you're on, which color you're wearing of jersey, what number your jersey is, and what position you are playing. And you'd be surprised how many video links that we would receive, and it'd say, here's a video link of me playing, and they don't tell us which one they are. Or they just say, I've got brown hair and a ponytail. And I say, well, okay, which of the 8 people are you that have brown hair and a ponytail? So I think making sure those details are included, you'd be surprised how many times we get those videos. Just make sure that those little pieces are included, and what jersey color you're wearing and where you're playing on the field, I think is important. Yeah,
great point. And to piggyback off of that, Renee, could you give the parents that are listening, let's say maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice about their role in the recruiting process?
Well, I think it's important to really them be active, but not the one who is taking the steps. I think it's important where they sit down with their student athletes and start to narrow down what factors are important to that kid. Obviously the academic piece, but also what size of classes do they want? Not just the program, what they want, but do they want a school where they may have, 1,000 people in an intro class or 100 people in an intro class? Or are they looking for a smaller environment where they may be successful? But also they want to be in a big city. How far away from home do they want to be? Do they want to be in a rural situation where the nearest target may be 17 miles away? And I say that speaking from experience in a small school in North Carolina. The idea of, narrowing down what type of social atmosphere do they want? Is it a school that is very high intensive in terms of Greek? Or are they looking for a Christian college where they may have chapels to attend and, an environment where it's a little bit different? But I think helping them really narrow down a list of, maybe 20 schools and depending on distance and location, and as well as what the atmosphere of the school is, and walking through that, I always tell every family to create an Excel sheet and really kind of get a narrowing down of what those things could look like, and, but also help them construct some of those emails to those college coaches, but do not send those emails for them. But you can look over their shoulder. You can walk through them and say, hey, paragraph 1, you should probably say this. And paragraph 2, you could talk about this. But more importantly, they should also be active in helping their student athlete go and explore the colleges. There is no reason you can't just go and actually do a drive next to, especially when you're out at tournaments and things like that, you just go drive by a school. You look at some of where the major tournaments are, whatever sport you're playing in, and, go and see what colleges are within an hour of there. And during your off hours, just go and drive by a school and look at the campus. And, maybe you would set up a time to meet with the admission staff. And, don't expect that the coaches are always going to be available to speak with you, nor have time to speak with you. But just being able to explore those things. And I think parents need to be proactive in helping their student just really process through this, as they really start to narrow it down. And I think that's important. They should not be calling coaches. They should not be emailing coaches. They should not be setting up times to visit. That the student athlete should be doing all of that. But then I think once they do get to a situation where they are in a coach's office, I think letting the student athlete take the lead in answering questions and asking questions to the coach. But at a certain time, the coach will say to the parents, hey, parents, what questions do you have? And that's when it's their time to step in, but not to dominate the conversation. I think the parents have to realize that the coach is really trying to figure out, is your son or daughter going to be a great fit for us? That 18 to 22-year-old is going to be with us for 4 years. Yes, the parent will be a support system to that kid, but that we're trying to really figure out, is that kid the right fit for our program? And so if parents are taking the lead, it really gives us the understanding that the child isn't mature enough to be able to take those steps, and it really makes us as college coaches very nervous. So I think, remember, you can help guide them, you can help direct them, but I think it's important that they're not taking the lead on it. But also, they can still help them in the narrowing down process. That's what I think is important.
And kind of a spin-off question to that, Renee, and with the coaches that you've interviewed for your book and yourself, obviously, with your experience, have you seen situations where perhaps a student athlete wasn't recruited because of maybe an overbearing parent, or maybe even the behavior or antics of a parent on a sideline?
Absolutely. I actually, I can tell you, I have one coach who asked me to keep their program anonymous. They actually were looking at a very high level student athlete, and after they had watched the video, they really liked the kid, and they had seen the kid at a faraway tournament the parents did not travel to. They were very interested. We're going to offer a full ride to the kid, and then they decided to watch them go and see one more time, just to get a feel for their coach was going to play him in a different position and see what that was like. And they then figured out a parent was there, and that parent was rather, the word obnoxious is probably the most accurate description. And they directly went over to the coach and asked, is that their parent? And those coaches picked up their recruiting chairs and walked away and said, absolutely not, because they know that parent will then be a representative of their program down the road. So it's important for parents to realize their sideline behavior does impact that. That kid did not get a full ride offer from that college. And that coach has asked to be remain anonymous in my book. But it is an amazing story that, you look and say, wow, we need to make sure that you're not ruining your chances for your child just because of your sideline behavior. And honestly, the parent was all ticked off at the referees, but also at the coach for playing the kid out of a position
in a different position.
When the college coach, and the college coach had actually asked that kid to be played in a different position because they saw them in a different role at the college level. So an interesting perspective.
And, Renee, I suspect that we would hear from many other coaches around the country that this type of situation has happened before.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to switch up a little bit on you now, Renee. You have taken teams that were 0-19 and had the pressure to try to win games there. You have worked in the Florida Heat, but I don't know if you've ever dealt with anything like our Getting to Know You section that Mark is about to embark you on this journey with, starting with the music.
And survived Irma, too.
Oh. I just survived Hurricane Irma. I think I can do this.
Well, we'll see. I love this song. I don't know if Renee knows that we just finished the finishing touches on the Getting to Know You room. So, Chris, if you could hit the door, please.
Right. Now you're entering into the Getting to Know You room. And, of course, as we know, which we haven't touched upon, but all of us know, you're a huge Disney fan. So to be able to hear a little bit of, was that Julie Andrews?
I believe that is Miss Andrews.
Miss Andrews, and we know that she was Mary Poppins, correct?
I believe she was Mary Poppins.
Okay, you see how we get the 6 degrees of separation with Disney? There's always 6 degrees of separation with Disney somewhere. Okay, here's Mark.
So in this Getting to Know You section, I am going to channel my 1980s inner game show host's voice. So, Renee,
oh dear.
If we were to search your phone, what would be the top 3 played songs or artists?
Oh, wow. Well, that is really hard for me to answer. One, I can tell you, having survived Hurricane Irma here just recently this week, I will say Survivor. I'm a survivor. That song that has been played quite a bit. I definitely have tons of Disney. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to remember which one is probably the most played recently. It is a toss-up between Moana and The Lion King. And then also I would have a lot of Christian artists that, let me tell you, when you are facing 100-mile-per-hour winds in your laundry room and just praying that your house doesn't blow away as you hear shingles being ripped off of it, you definitely hear it praying some worship songs. So Chris Tomlin was definitely being played this week as I was praying I lived through this week.
Renee, who is the most famous person in your contact list?
Oh, wow. I've met a lot of the U.S. Women's National Team, so they're definitely some in that. But I also have a couple of very good friends of mine with the executive director of the National Christian Colleges, as well as University of Virginia head coach Steve Swanson, and also the head coach at University of Florida, Becky Burley. Steve was actually on the U.S. Women's National Team assistant coaching staff for the 2015 Women's World Cup. So the soccer gurus in the world will appreciate that, and I have definitely met a lot of the soccer world for sure.
And correct me if I'm wrong, did Becky won a national championship, didn't she?
Yes, that was with Daniel Fotopoulos, and 1998, I believe it was. So,
I see you know some big time people.
Yes, Fotop's also in my contact list too.
Great player.
Absolutely.
Question number 3: do you have a favorite quote?
Absolutely. I would say Colossians 3:23. Work enthusiastically in all things unto the Lord, and I believe that's my mantra in everything that I do, is to make sure that I bring 100% effort and energy to every project I take on. I am a all in or nothing. That's my mentality. So it is definitely a mantra for everything that I do.
Excellent. Renee, can you give the listeners a little known fact about yourself?
Well, you definitely spilled the beans already on the Disney fact. I do live only 40 minutes away from there, so I do have to say that I have an annual pass holder, and I definitely swing over there as much as possible to get away from life and also to get away from the beach. So get away. I'm not sure how great that's going to be in the next few weeks as we do a lot of cleanup efforts here. But I used to live, I grew up in the Chicago area, and I also lived in the mountains of North Carolina and also in Colorado. And I can tell you, I despise snow. I love heat and beach, and that's probably my focus outside of Disney.
And Mickey makes everything better, though, right?
Yes, and Mickey is okay down here, so we know that we've checked on him. He's all right.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
And our midpoint question, who's been the biggest influence in your life?
Oh, man, so many coaches, definitely, I will say. But I had an amazing athletic director I worked under when I was at a small school at Lees-McRae College, a D2 school in North Carolina. His name is Reed Estes, and he was my athletic director when I became my first college head coaching position. And I worked under him for 5.5 years, and absolutely phenomenal. He'd been a college coach himself and very successful, and he became an athletic director and just really influenced me, and as well as, working with other coaches, like I mentioned earlier, and but also obviously my family, and they have made a huge impact on my life too.
Excellent. Renee, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Wow, that is so hard to answer. First of all,
Told you.
Be Jesus. I would love to have some conversations with him face to face. Wasn't sure if that was going to happen this week or not. But we definitely would say that. But having, I would definitely say, there's a lot of other people that I would think I would love to speak with in the sports world. But I also believe that Tim Tebow wants to marry me. He just hasn't met me yet. So we'll hopefully get a first date at some point in time.
Right. Well, again, I hope he doesn't ask you to marry you, because we talked about that in the recruiting process being very similar to that. So if he asked to marry you on a first date, there'd be a problem.
There better be a proper courting.
Yes, we'll have to have a proper courting, but we're both Florida alumni, so and also love sports ministry. So he's out and about doing things to help change the world, and it's using sports as an avenue for that. And I love to do that myself, and do missions trips and with sports as well.
Excellent. Renee, if you weren't an author and lecturer, what do you think you would be doing?
Wow. Obviously I've been called back to college coaching multiple times since I left it about 1.5 years ago. So it'd probably be coaching. I've coached little 5-year-olds as well, all the way up. I've gotten roped back into doing some camps and things like that. So I'm sure it'd be in sports world, but also, like I mentioned, sports ministry and working with organizations like Fellowship of Christian Athletes and organizations that would probably be, able to impact people's lives, like I love to do with our consulting work that we do. So it would definitely be still in the sports world and ministry world.
Excellent. What is one thing you believe that others might think is crazy?
Oh, wow. I believe there's really a good fit for a lot of student athletes to find a college. So many people think that they may not be good enough, but they may be able to go and contribute at a program that may just be a brand new program or a junior college, and or a program that's just trying to rebuild itself. So, a lot of kids say, that recruiting and finding a program is only for, a couple of kids. I think there's other options if it's a matter of exploring what's the right fit for you. So it may not be a popular opinion, but I think there is a lot of options for kids that, if they're willing to find the right fit, they may be able to find a spot. And
question 9, how about your morning ritual?
Any of my friends would laugh at this. I am not a morning person. Any of my student athletes who played for me will definitely laugh at this too. Coach is not a morning person at all. So getting to the point of getting some caffeine in me is very key. And getting a shower. And those two things are very key before I can really function. And if you try to talk to me before then, it's not going to be a great conversation. I'm just going to be honest with you.
And our last and final question, Renee, what book are you currently reading or have just read?
Oh, wow. Well, I am a certified speaker, trainer, and coach for the John Maxwell team as well as the John Gordon companies. So I'm always reading them, and a lot of their information that's out there. So I highly encourage student athletes to be reading The Energy Bus by John Gordon. He's also just come out with the Positive Leader as a phenomenal book he just came out with, as well as John Maxwell. I think he's written 100 books on leadership development, but I think it's really there's some really good ones out there that he's really talked about. It's called Leadership Gold, as well as Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. Both of them really deal with creating positive culture, as well as how can you be a leader that's going to make an impact. I think it's important that student athletes really look to really think through that, is what other things are they doing to grow themselves. And so I'm always reading. I'm constantly, obviously, looking for ways to grow myself and my business too. So there's about 12 books sitting on my desktop right now that I need to get to. As well as I do have to put a plug that I'm actually reading some books on growing your business with the magic of Disney as well, by Lee Cockrell, who was the vice president of Disney too.
Excellent. Thanks, Renee.
Well, it's obvious, Renee, that you just knocked those questions out of the park. Terrible little soundbite right there. But I will say that it's even more obvious that the ordeal that you've just endured with Hurricane Irma has made you tough, made you strong, and you handled those questions with the greatest of ease. So many other coaches and our guests have folded under that line of questioning. They've had to go to the Gatorade. They've had to take a 20. They've had to get the towel. But in this case, it's obvious the week that you've just endured has made you tougher, stronger, and able to deal with the TCS getting to know you
We may have
session.
to up our game here on the questions.
Yeah, well, our game has to get stronger. You're right. My final question, Renee, is we know that you have your book coming out in the spring, as you mentioned before. Where do you see your company and yourself, let's say, in the, next year or two?
Wow. Well, we're doing a lot right now. We are gathering a lot of content. Like I mentioned, I do a lot of speaking engagements where I come to high schools and student athletes, and also in club systems, that I will come in and do recruiting seminars and, just really provide information and really get the insiders information that parents and families and student athletes need to know, as well as I work with guidance counselors and go out and speak with them. I work in speaking across the country, doing leadership seminars and what are college coaches looking for, and also some seminars in building confidence and how do we help student athletes with their mental game. So that's starting to happen, as well as we are building out a lot of content. We are going to be creating online courses that student athletes can take from their home, as well as group consulting. So we have individual consulting, like I mentioned, that I do work with specific student athletes and their families, on a pretty regular basis. But we're also building out group consulting services where you can get on the phone. You and a couple other people are on the phone with me, a couple times a month. I usually do a 20 to 30 minute teaching lesson, whether it's just what things you should include in an email to college coaches or what should you make sure is on your social media, what should you make sure is not on your social media, but also the questions that you should be asking to a college coach when you're sitting in their office, but also educating on NCAA rules. Like you mentioned, I've been an NCAA compliance director as well. And so the idea is a couple times a month, we're doing those group seminars. And then all you have to do is dial in from your home. And, those are things that we're working on and building out, as well as courses. That is something that we are just continuously building out and just adding more and more information. And, that may mean that I bring another college coach in to speak as well on a webinar, or just you just dial in to a conference call. But to educate, that's my whole purpose, is educating and making sure that there's just so much misinformation that's out there on the college recruiting process. And to be honest with you, a lot of the movies are part of the problem with that. Like I mentioned, The Blind Side. So I want to make sure that I help educate, and I will tell them the truth. I'll tell them the realities. I'll tell them percentages of kids that get scholarships and what does that all look like. And we're just continuously building that out. And I'd love to be able to help and connect with you guys we've actually just created something which I think all the parents that are listening to this and students, I would definitely tell your parents about this if you're that we've created a Facebook group that is completely free. It's called Parents of High School Student Athletes Walking Through College Recruiting Process. And the idea is I provide information on that Facebook group every day, Monday through Friday, and helping kids and parents just really understand the process. And I interact on there. You can ask me questions on there, and I'll respond, and I'll do some videos if you need me to, or such. So that is 100% free, so I encourage you guys to do that. I also have some free resources on my website. Like I mentioned, we have created a special report on the leadership characteristics that college coaches are looking for. You can find on my website. It's www.rlopezcoaching.com, rlopezcoaching.com. We also have a resource on there that is the special report on email strategies to contacting a college coach, and information I put together, having interviewed all these college coaches. All this stuff is going to be leading into, obviously, with my book coming out, and we're in the editing process right now, so that is, loads of fun. But also, I want to offer out to all of your listeners too that they can connect with me on, like I mentioned, on Facebook, but also at info@lookingforafullride.com, info@lookingforafullride.com. My book website will also be www.lookingforafullride.com. And for all of your listeners, I will offer out, I don't do this very often, but I think this is important to be able to help them. So prepare yourself. Maybe I'm crazy after going through Irma, but I will offer out to every one of your listeners, if you send me an email at info@lookingforafullride.com, I will offer out a free 30-minute consultation to walk you through a little bit of some of the do's and don'ts that you're doing in the process, help guide you in that, and really just speak with you through the process. We can do it on Skype or FaceTime, whatever works for the student athlete and the parent. I ask the parent to also be present during that, but I will offer that out to any one of your listeners, and you can just send me an email, and we will set up an appointment for 30 minutes for free, and we'll talk, and I'll just help guide you in that direction. And then, if you want to jump on board with me longer term, my prices are very reasonable. And right now we are actually running again, I must be crazy after Irma, we're actually doing a 50% off of my recruiting consulting services. And we're running that special for the next about a month and a half. So we'll post all that onto hopefully your website and information on the notes for the podcast too.
Yeah, Renee, we certainly will do that. We'll put it up in the show notes. So anybody listening today and going forward, we'll have the links there to all those nice offers that you gave the audience. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to help. That's my heart, and that's what I'm doing. Like I said, I stepped out of college coaching because I believe I can help a lot of people. And so if it's, you want me to come to your group and speak, I would be glad to come to your high school or to your club. I've even had some people Skype me in across the country. I've even spoken to places outside of the United States as well, into Canada, and I've even spoken to Malaysia. So
wow.
I got to figure out the time difference. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to do that.
As long as it's not in the morning as long as it's not in the morning for you, because we already heard what the morning is like.
Yeah, pre-coffee and shower.
It depends if I've had my caffeine. Let me have my caffeine first, and I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to work on some things going forward as well. So once again, we want to thank Renee Lopez, again, author, certified speaker, trainer, USSF and NSCAA licensed, coached, and Irma survivor.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We appreciate it. And before we let you guys go, just remember on the web for us is tacklingcollegesports.com. Our email is tacklingcollegesports@gmail.com. Facebook is facebook.com/tacklingcollegesports. Twitter @tacklingcollege. Instagram tacklingcollege. And I think that's it. Until next time, be your best.
Be your best.
Your college sports future awaits. So join the TCS Nation and be your best.